Well, thank you all so much for letting me be a part of your Saturday. Thank you to the conference for allowing me to be a part of this conference. This is absolutely my favorite conference to attend and to speak at, and I always run into people that I went to school with and worked with, and it's just a wonderful conference, and I'm so glad that we're having it. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to talk about sexual orientation and gender identity. And this is a very, very basic information on sexual orientation and gender identity. We are, hold on. Going to go over some basic, biology, terminology, policy, but I want it to be as interactive as possible. Now, it's hard to do it with on Zoom, but we're going to give it a shot, and I'm going to ask questions. If you would put answer in the chat, and there might be a few things that'll be like true or false that you can hit reactions. But if you could kind of be ready in the chat to put in thoughts as I ask questions, that'd be great. If it takes too long for people to answer, then we'll just maybe not do it. But in my in-person trainings, we do a lot of interaction, and I think it's helpful. So, all right. So here's your first question. On this screen, you see two individuals. The person here on the right, put in the chat what you believe the biological sex of the person on the right is. Biological sex of the person on the right, female. Oh, all right. Okay. Next question. Can you tell me the sexual orientation of the person on the right? All right, Natalie. All right, heterosexual. All right. No way of knowing. All right, so we're going to look at this. Assume heterosexual, unable to tell. All right, good job. We're gonna learn a little bit, and then we're going to ask those questions again. So again, the overall goal of today, the agenda, is we're just going to learn basic terms and definitions. We're going to look a little bit at some policy and law, and we're also going to look at some strategies. Now, I do a little community work, but I typically do trainings in school. So a lot of this, especially towards the end, in terms of strategies, is a little bit education heavy, but I think most of this is applicable to any workplace. So in terms of what to expect, I want to be really, really clear. I'm not asking, we do this training, I'm not going to ask anybody to abandon their religious beliefs. I want you to know that in this training, we are going to use anatomically correct words for body parts and some kind of Latin terminology. I know that there's a lot of slang, some good, some bad, and I'm going to try to keep away from the slang a little bit and just use medical terminology and anatomically correct terms for body parts. There are going to be two screens where there will be where you will actually we'll be looking at sketches of some body parts. I will warn you ahead of time, so if you don't want to look at that, you don't have to, but we are going to do that. And again, terminology, biology, policy, and then hopefully we'll have time for strategy as well. All right, so our sexuality is basically wrapped up into what I term as 4 buckets. And we're going to look, kind of take a deep dive into each of these 4 buckets over the next maybe 15, 20 minutes. So bucket 1 is biological sex, which could also, we're going to talk a little bit about assigned sex as well. Gender identity is a different bucket. Sexual orientation is a different bucket. And then sexual behavior is the fourth bucket. Now, the first three, as far as I know, everybody has all three. You have a biological sex, you have a gender identity, and you have a sexual orientation. Everybody has that. The last one, sexual behavior, some people do not have sexual behavior. Most people do, but certainly certainly some people just do not for different reasons. Maybe it's a medical issue or choice or whatever, but most people have all four of these. So to take a deeper dive into biological sex. So here's something to put in the chat. When determining biological or assigned sex, this is basically, a baby is born and what the doctor calls a person at birth. And type in the chat what determines, how does the doctor or midwife, how do they determine what they would either be the biological or assigned sex of a baby? Presentation of sex organs. Yes. And so very good. Now, the next question is the genitalia, the sex organs, and then what are the options? Well, they look at the genitalia and then they say, this is what? Male or female? Male, female, or intersex? I've never seen intersex on birth certificate, but I think might be changing that. Male or female. Yeah. So you have typically what happens, a baby's born, the doctor looks at the genitalia and says, oh, congratulations, you have a baby boy or a baby girl. But is that the only option, right? So it turns out that sometimes, and somebody mentioned this in here, ambiguous genitalia. So sometimes babies are born and the appearance of their genitalia is not clearly what people would say is male genitalia, or very clearly a female genitalia. Sometimes it's somewhat of a mix of both, or just ambiguous genitalia. So what happens then? So then if you have a baby with ambiguous genitalia, then how do you then determine the sex of the baby? Any ideas on that? X-rays inside. Pick the sex that seems most consistent with the presentation. Well, that's very much what has happened in the past. It's caused a lot of really trauma among people who have been born with ambiguous genitalia, but it still happens. It's getting less rare. Ultrasound. All right, Jill Freeman, bingo. All right, so I think there's different things that people do, but certainly then we're moving into if you can get the DNA. So you do a DNA test. So now we're moving into, what really is the biological sex. I mean, it's one thing to look at some, organs, but when you look at the DNA, then you can really, all right, that should be our determination, right? That should be it. So think back to your biology class. And so we're going to do a DNA test. And what are the options? What might we end up with knowing? What are the answers that the DNA will give us? Do you remember? Yeah. XX and XY, Carrie, bingo. All right, yes. So you look at the chromosome, you get this. Females are typically the XX, and males are XY, and that should be our determination, right? That we have it now, right? Well, are those the only options? I mean, do you think there's anything else out there other than XX and XY? No. Somebody says no. Somebody says XXY, others yes. So it turns out that there are other genetic DNA sex chromosomes. And so there's a total of 9 that the World Health Organization identifies. They're listed here: a single X, a single Y, triple X, XYY, XXY. Some males are XX and some females are XY. Now, certainly, this is not a large population. However, it is 1.5% of the world's population falls into this this category of being of intersex, right? And that's the term intersex. Now, what I would like you to think of now and post in the chat, I want you to think how many people you personally know at any age range that has naturally red hair. Just type your number in. How many people do you personally know that has naturally red hair? 3, 5, 10, 9, 6, 2, 1, 5. My niece, 3, oh, 25. Wow. All right. Most people usually say 5 or 6. So it just so happens, not that people with naturally red hair are intersex, but it just so happens that people with naturally red hair also make up about 1.5% of the population. So just as many people that you know have naturally red hair are very likely people who are intersex. Obviously, for societal reasons and all the stuff that people have to deal with, that's not something that is that you talk about a lot. But anyway, you probably, if you know 5 redhead people, you probably know 5 intersex people, but just don't know that they're intersex. All right, next bucket. All right, that is our bucket. And I'm going to, now just so you know, take notes because you're going to be quizzed on this stuff in just a little bit. All right, so this is our biological sex bucket. All right, now we're moving on to a different, but everybody has a biological sex. All right, now we're moving on to a different bucket. Here's our next bucket, gender identity. All right, now I asked you guys right as the session was starting. I'm like, hey, how are you guys feeling today? It's the end of the conference. Some people have been here, all the whole, last few days. I was on the last 2 days on some of the sessions. I know that people really cramming in to get their CEUs. But anyway, it's like, how are you feeling? Betsy, she's, been in the middle of organizing all this stuff. She kind of verbally sighed. Somebody said wahoo. Somebody said grateful. Right? These are how people feel. All right. And so if I was to the person who said grateful and said to them, do you really feel that way? I'm just not sure you feel that way. You don't look grateful, the point of me saying this is that gender identity is it's a psychological quality. It's something that it's not observed, it's not measured. We can't do a DNA test to prove somebody's gender identity. The only way that we have of telling somebody's gender identity is what they report to us. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is how people feel. All right. Using our kind of Latin terminology, cisgender, and again, everybody has a gender identity. So I'm biologically female, and I feel female. And when your biological sex and how you feel, the gender that you feel matches, it's the same. The term for that is cisgender. There's some slang that refers to cis as like comfortable in skin, which is kind of cute. I kind of like that expression, but it's really a Latin term that means the same. The term transgender is the opposite of that. So your biological sex and the gender that you feel don't match. So that is transgender. And then of course, agender is when people don't feel very strongly male or very strongly female, and so identify as agender. Everyone has a gender identity. All right. Now moving on to our third bucket. All right. Third bucket of our sexuality is our sexual orientation. So our sexual orientation is just simply who you're attracted to. And that attraction can take different forms, emotional attraction, physical, romantic, sexual attraction, but it's who you are attracted to, right? So I put that little compass there because I think of, who you're oriented, that attraction and that orientation. So going back to our Latin terminology, the term hetero, sexual, using the hetero, is different. So somebody who is, identifies biologically or in their gender as female, and their attraction is to the opposite, males would be heterosexual. Whereas somebody of one gender who is attracted to the other gender would be homo, which is same, homosexual. Another term that's often used, more common now, is pansexual. And people who identify as pansexual describe not feeling that their sexuality and their attraction is limited by gender. And then some people identify as asexual, which means their sexual orientation is one that they are not sexually or romantically attracted to other people. So that's our third bucket, is sexual orientation. All right. Everybody has sexual orientation. All right. Next, our last bucket is sexual behavior. And this is the one that I mentioned that maybe not, most people have sexual behavior, but maybe not everybody, either because of disability or interest or whatever. But most people do have sexual behavior. So think of I think of Schoolhouse Rock as that verb, that's what's happening. So sexual behavior is a word, a verb. It's an action. So sexual acts such as hugging, kissing, sexual intercourse, dating, things like that are sexual behaviors that, again, most people engage in, at least at some point in their life. All right, so now here's a little statistic that will mess with you, that will kind of get to a little bit of the heart of what I want to do. But this is a true statistic. This statistic says that young women that identify as lesbian or bisexual are twice as likely to become pregnant than their, quote, straight counterparts. So in the chat, if you would, tell me why you think that statistic, well, first, let me back up. If you feel that doesn't make any sense, you can say so. If you have an idea of why that statistic is a true statistic, then put in the chat what you think are reasons for this, that young women that identify as lesbian or bisexual are twice as likely to become pregnant as their straight counterparts. Somebody said that stat surprised them. Not trying to be a lesbian. I know LG people initially try to resist being gay, engaging, trying to be sure they aren't lesbian by having sex with men to deny their sexual orientation. All right. So all these are really good things. The study that came out with the statistic, and to look at it, and I have it linked there, or cited there, it has to do with bullying, not trying to fit in, denying who they are, trying to fit in. It also has a lot to do with family acceptance or lack of family acceptance. And I was doing this training a few years ago, and a DHHR worker, we talked about this statistic, and this DHHR worker gave it's heartbreaking example, a true story. She had worked with a young girl, I think she was about 15 or 16, who self-identified as lesbian, and her parents kicked her out of the house, and she was not welcome in her home simply because she was lesbian. And so not too long after she was placed in foster care, she became pregnant. And so after she became pregnant, her family welcomed her back, and her dad told the social worker, see, I told you she was just going through a phase. Now, but I want you to think just for a minute, back when you were 16, 15, 16, and you're almost completely dependent on your family. You're kicked out of your house. You don't have a bed to sleep in. Everything that you had in life, food and shelter, and the home, a place to live, your family, all that is gone simply because of who you are attracted to, right? And then think, what would you not do? I mean, what would you not do to get back to that comfort level, right? To get back home. And so it's not surprising to me at all that people would do something that they might not otherwise do to be loved and accepted back into their family. All right. And so the thing that I want you to take away from this and to remember about this is, I mean, there are a couple different buckets here, right? So young women that identify as lesbian and bisexual, that lesbian, bisexual, that's a sexual orientation, right? And so we have sort of our ideas of what type of sexual behavior, which is a different bucket. Oh, well, if you're lesbian, then here's the type of sexual behaviors you do. And so we try to put things together that should not be together. And so here, obviously, these young women are engaging in sexual intercourse with males to get pregnant. And that's not something that people often think that a lesbian would do. So it's very important not to say, oh, somebody has this bucket and therefore I can assume things about this other bucket. We need to stop assuming different aspects of people's sexuality based on what we know about one bucket, right? Because often we're very wrong. So there are often these really, really long acronyms related to the LGBTQ world. And I want to go over a few of those. This will be pretty quick, but the L in LGBTQIA stands for lesbian, a female that is attracted to a female. G is gay. That is gay can also be sort of an umbrella term for homosexual. So gay could include both males and females. B is bisexual, a person who is attracted to more than one gender. T is typically stands for transgender. And we talked about that in terms of gender identity. A person doesn't feel is the key word, feel like they are the same gender that they would typically match their biological sex. Q is a really, really interesting term that I really like. So it's sort of like it can stand for queer or questioning. It's basically an umbrella term for people who don't identify as cisgender or heterosexual. And so the really cool thing about this, I mean, when I grew up, the term queer was a kind of the equivalent of the N word. It was a demeaning word. It was a word that you used to put people down. And so I still have difficulty using that word. And but the LGBTQ community, they took that word back. It was used to hurt them, and they took it and they owned it, and now it's their word to use how they want to. The African American community did that with the N word, which is I still like to use, but they took that word, and so now queer or questioning are terms in the LGBTQ community. Obviously, questioning is, some people don't figure this stuff out overnight, and they need some time to kind of try out some new things, in terms of, it might have to do how they dress. It might have to do with trying to date one person or another, and just trying to figure out things. And I think that we have to be very patient with people as they're figuring this stuff out. It's not like heterosexual people or cisgender people don't have to figure stuff out as well. But that's just, this questioning term is a nice term to I think to give space for people to figure out what they who they are and how they want to present. We're going to go into a little bit deeper dive into I in just a minute. So I'm skipping over I, but A can stand for ally or asexual. So certainly in the LGBTQ community, not so much now, but 20 years ago, if you were an ally to the LGBT community, you were horribly at risk. Maybe not as much, but very much so in terms of being bullied and harassed and attacked. And so that's, the LGBT community has always been very open in terms of, welcoming allies. So A is for ally. All right, so now we're going to do a little bit deeper dive into I. So people caught on to this super early when we were going over talking about our ambiguous genitalia and the other intersex genetic chromosomes. But basically, the term intersex is used for a variety of conditions where a person who's born with either reproductive or their sexual anatomy or genetic chromosomes that really doesn't seem to fit like the typical definitions of male and female. All right, so it's a variety of conditions. In terms of how common it is, because there are a lot of different types of intersex conditions, they can be extremely rare. Like here's 1 in 150,000. But something like Klinefelter we're going to look at is 1 in 1,000. That's pretty common. Late onset adrenal hyperplasia, it's 1 in 100. Right. So there are, a variety of different types, and it's pretty common. All right, so let's talk a minute about one of those. This is 1 in 1,000. The rate of this is 1 in 1,000. This is Klinefelter syndrome, and people who are born with the genetic chromosomes of XXY have Klinefelter syndrome. Now, the interesting thing about this is, I told you I was going to give you a warning, and this isn't too bad. I meant to tell you that a little bit ahead of time. But anyway, so here's our body sketch. And so somebody with Klinefelter is born with male anatomy. So born with a penis, testes, and scrotum. All right. So at birth are identified on birth certificates as male. As they grow, as they start to go through puberty, they typically do not have more of the secondary sex characteristics that girls go through when they go through puberty. They don't have the male version of puberty. They have more of a female version of puberty. So they end up having breast development. As males go through puberty, often their shoulders broaden. Klinefelters usually have narrow shoulders. As females go through puberty, they kind of get wider hips, and they develop pubic hair. This in Klinefelter is much more what you consider female secondary sex characteristics and features. Long legs, again, breast development. And then, typically males begin in adolescence to grow beards and have chest hair. A Klinefelter, somebody with Klinefelter typically does not. And then as men begin to age, they, a common characteristic is starting to bald, especially right here, at the front. And somebody with Klinefelter typically does not have that. And the other interesting thing about Klinefelter, obviously, we don't do, I've never had a DNA test. I doubt, most people have. So very often people have no clue that they have Klinefelter syndrome. And so often the way that they find out that they are Klinefelter is, they get married. They try to have kids, and in the process of trying to have kids, they run into problems because they have while they do have penis and testes, have very small testicles that don't produce as much, very much sperm. And so in the process of trying to, get their partner pregnant, if they eventually go to have some, testing done to see what the problem is, often that's when it's discovered, through, sperm samples and things like that. They end up doing a series of tests. So that's a very common way that people find out that they have Klinefelter syndrome. And again, typically cannot have children unless it's through an in vitro process. Another really, and I mean, honestly, I think you all tell me if this, what we're getting ready to go over right now, please tell me if this is not the most fascinating thing that you've, well, for me, it's probably ever learned, but certainly it'll probably the most fascinating thing you learn today or this week. So this is a condition called guaidosis, and I don't know if you can see, you're looking at my screen, but if you can see me just for a second. So there is, what's interesting to know before we go into, all right, all right, so everybody is basically, for some reason, is the screen flashing for you? Because it is for me. Can somebody come on and tell me?
No,
not flashing.
not flashing here.
All right, so it's just going to bug me for some reason. My screen's flashing. All right, so are we all good still?
The screen
Yeah.
is
Okay, all right, okay. It's just, it's
Everything
really,
disappeared. Your red screen disappeared.
Yes, it's black.
PowerPoint.
okay.
Lost the PowerPoint.
And you are frozen.
Yes, she's frozen. I think she must be having some connectivity issues at her home. Everybody take a second to stretch.
Get that cat off of the Wi-Fi.
Yep, and there she goes.
How is everybody doing so far?
Doing great.
Glued to the subject.
I'm dying to know what this really fascinating thing is that we're going to learn.
I know.
Absolutely. It's like that's when it goes out.
Perfect point of
Talk about
suspense.
screens, man.
She's doing a really good job, though.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a great class.
Yeah.
It's really building suspense. Even if you weren't interested, you're really wanting to know now.
Right, right.
I think I, as an LGBTQ person, have enough hubris to sometimes think that I know everything. And so trainings like this can sometimes feel a little bit like, oh, I'm just here for the CEUs, but I've already learned a lot that I didn't know. So this is definitely very informative.
Well, Christopher, that makes me feel better. Because I've heard this term QIA. I had LGBTQ, but IA I just didn't get. And that, I'm so glad someone else didn't know some of the stuff.
The terminology changes so much.
Right. I believe
It does. It does.
All right, guys, I'm back. I'm so sorry about that, and I really hope it doesn't happen again. All right.
Okay, we just did a commercial break. And
Excellent.
It was a good talk. And I'm glad
Excellent.
the next people didn't come.
All right, let me get to my slide, and then I'm gonna, before I share though, I wanna.
You just did the Beckley bounce.
All right. Let me find my slide. This is the worst thing to have this happen in the middle of a training, but thank you for your patience.
We all
Vicki,
understand.
great job.
Thank you.
There's a lot of appreciation in the chat. You probably don't have time to look at it, but people are really enjoying this.
Oh, excellent. That makes me really happy. All right. So, so the thing that I wanted to, before I show the screen again, because I talk with my hands, but the thing that you need to know before we go talk a little bit more about guaibadosis is that everybody when your mom is pregnant with you, right? Every person, every baby is at the moment destined to become female. Like that is the default, right? Everybody, if there's no hormones or enzymes that get down to the developing embryo, everybody is set to be a female, right? Everybody. And so everybody has these gonads, right? And so at very early in the stage, I think it's like around 6 or 8 weeks, then if you have an XX chromosomes, then nothing happens, and you just continue to develop. The gonads eventually become ovaries, and then the external body parts, which in a female would be the vulva and the clitoris. Those will go ahead and develop, right? That everything is set to do. There's no extra thing that needs to happen. That's the default. But in males, what happens is because they have the Y chromosome, the Y chromosome does something and it starts to send messages through the body. And so the Y chromosome basically tells the gonads, hey, you're not going to become ovaries, you're going to develop into testes. And so then they begin to drop, and then they, what would typically in a female become the vulva, which are the folds outside of the vagina. That becomes the scrotum to hold the testes. What in a female would be a clitoris grows and develops into a penis. And so because of this very, very early messaging that basically comes because of the Y chromosome, then that baby that was set to become female develops male body characteristics and becomes what we would say is male, right? So now that you know how that works, let me share my screen. And
We see you.
all right. Current slide. All right, you see that up there, big red box?
Yes, we
Yes,
do.
we do.
All right, excellent. All right, so this is what happens in guaibadosis. At that critical time stage when the messaging would go to the body parts that say, hey, become boy body parts, something happens. And the Y chromosome doesn't do its job. It doesn't tell the body parts to grow, and it's therefore because everybody is set to become female. Because the Y chromosome doesn't do its job, then that baby is born with female genitalia. It has XY chromosome, the male chromosomes, but it was born with female genitalia. Now, what happens, that baby is, grows up, and, often the way we do, in our society or normal societies, normal, that's a bad word, sorry. Typical society is, that baby is going to be raised with dresses and baby dolls and all that stuff, cultural stuff. But then around the age of 11 or 12, when that child is entering puberty, what happens is that this time the Y chromosome does what it's supposed to do. And the reason males enter puberty and start to develop these secondary sex characteristics like facial hair and just male characteristics is because the Y chromosome, it kicks in again around puberty. So what happens in the Guayabadoses kids is this time around, the Y chromosome does what it's supposed to do. So it releases these messages that tells the body to develop into a male. And so literally over a couple years of puberty, a child this Guayabadoses child physically, without any outside interaction, develops physically into a male. So the clitoris develops into a penis, the vulva develops into a scrotum, the gonads then develop into testes and descend. And so by the time this child is, 14 or 15 years old, is a, fully developed male with male characteristics, and can have children as well. So this is a very explicit sketch that I'm getting ready to show you. So if you, I'm just telling you, it very detailed body parts and showing the development of this. So if you don't want to see it, don't look. But here is, now, what I didn't mention to you, well, I think I said it was rare, but this is a very rare condition. It is primarily found in the Dominican Republic and New Guinea. And so from the left to the right, it shows the development of these of the sex organs. So anyway, that is Guayabadoses. Now, for some reason here, I don't think, oh, here's my chat back. Yeah, people are like, wow. Yes, I was, really surprised. This was a very, I felt very informed and felt that once I learned this, it was sort of like the breaking moment of me really beginning to understand things that I'd never understood before related to gender identity and that sort of thing. So anyway, I thought it was particularly fascinating. And there, if you are fascinated by this, I think PBS did a movie about it. So there's some other information out there about this. Okay, so now moving on, just to give you a sense of people who have intersex condition, basically the total number of people whose bodies differ in some way from what you would consider a standard male or female are about 1 in 100. And then about 1 or 2 in 1,000 people have some type of surgery to alter or what they might term normalize their genital appearance. So just to give you a sense of that, these numbers are up here because the last training I did was in Raleigh County. I try to do it by county, but Raleigh County had their total population is about 75,000 people. So in Raleigh County, that means if we use these statistics, that means about 750 people have bodies who differed from standard male or female, and probably about 75 have had surgery to quote normalize their genital appearance. So one thing that I think it's important to know and to think about in terms of intersex conditions is that while people do have surgery and people do choose to have surgery to address ambiguous genitalia or to do gender, well, no, that's transgender, that's different. But people often, what happens, especially in the past, is babies are born, they have ambiguous genitalia. The doctor says, well, I think based on what I have, I think I can make this out of it, And so babies without any consent whatsoever, people do surgeries on babies to make them fit, male or female. And without one, asking their permission, or two, having an understanding of what gender they identify with. And so this has been extremely traumatic for people who are intersex to identify, have their own identity, and then find out that somebody did surgery on their genitalia when they were babies without their consent. And so the intersex community has done an enormous amount of advocacy in the medical community to basically say, don't do surgery on babies. Let them figure out who they are and what they want, and let them and be informed about their options. And the other thing is important to know is that some people choose either they choose to because it's just their personal choice, or they choose to because they can't afford surgery, because, you know, the medical situation, you know, and insurance and all that stuff is crazy. But I mean, some people, you know, choose to live with the body parts that they have, and they may or may not have partners that are, you know, very accepting. And people can have very positive and loving and satisfactory, you know, emotional and romantic and sexual relationships, and their body parts don't look like the typical male and female. And so that's just important for people to understand, and to you know, just really understand that surgery is not for everybody for whatever reasons. And you know, we should. I just encourage everybody to be very accepting of people, regardless of what their choices are. All right, so now we're going to do an activity. And now I really need your help here, guys, because I am bound and determined that we can do this activity. And I'm going to look good in front of Betsy Kent. And I need your help to do that, okay? All right, so we're going to, man, my screen is really wacko. So let's hope this happens. All right, so here's our activity. And this is rough, but we're gonna try it. I told you that I wanted you to remember these buckets that we're doing. All right. So our buckets are biological sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, and sexual behavior. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read something to you, and I want you guys to put in the chat. And this is, and I apologize for the roughness of this. If we were in person, that this whole situation would be a little bit better. But for the most part, I would like you to identify at this side of these two bars as the binary male, and on this side the female, and then on these two heterosexual and homosexual. All right, and then just because I want you to have options. I've put this 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 to say where we're going to put this. Now that might sound a little confusing right now, but let's try this and see if this works. All right. So the first thing I'm gonna read something to you, and I want you to first identify which bucket this goes into. All right. So so you can just type in BS for biological sex, GI for gender identity, SO for sexual orientation, and SB for sexual behavior. All right. So which bucket does this go into? A male is attracted to a male. What bucket would that go into? Just type in chat. All right. Sexual orientation. All right. Very good. Let's see. All right, so I got, this will work. All right, so this is so weird. All right, sexual orientation, sort of down there. All right, now secondly, in terms of being, you know, here, or here, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, where would you put male attracted to male? 5? Let's see, 5s. All right, let me see if I can drag this over. Ah, yes, that worked. Excellent. All right, so yeah, so you guys got it. Now let's do a couple more of those. All right, so here, which bucket does this go into? Born with a vulva and clitoris. Which bucket? Biological sex. Very good. Very good. All right. So it's going to go into biological sex, and then born with vulva and clitoris. Where on this 1, 2, 3, or 5, where would it go? Somebody said 3. Lots of 5s. Yeah, I think it would be 5. So let's put that there. Yeah, excellent. All right, now let's do another one. All right. Has a vulva and clitoris, feels like a boy. Which bucket does that go into? Has vulva and clitoris, feels like a boy. Gender identity. Very, very good. And so this bucket, gender identity, and where on this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would that go? Has vulva and clitoris, feels like a boy. Got some 1s and 2s and 3s and 5s. All right. So remember what we said about feels like. So gender identity is very much about what you feel like. Yeah. So if somebody feels like a boy, then it makes sense that they'll be here and their gender identity is here closer to this male side. Very good. All right. All right. Here's another one. A female is attracted to a male. Which bucket is that? Sexual orientation bucket. Very good. And where on that? Where on that line? Female attracted to a male. 1 or 2. Yeah, so female attracted to a male, that's opposite. So opposite is hetero. So that would be, yeah, over here. All right, very good. Now let's try this one. Which bucket does this go in? Has XXY chromosomes. Which bucket is that? Yes, this is a biological sex. So XXY. Now, where on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would that fall? XXY. 3, lots of 3s. All right. Yep. I mean, I think that it's unclear that, it's unclear. And so we're not sure, it's not clearly go here and doesn't clearly go here. So somewhere in here, I think yeah. All right. All right. Now let's try this one. Female kisses a male. What bucket does that fall in? You guys are so smart. All right. Sexual behavior. All right. And on this scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, being heterosexual or homosexual, where do we think that goes? Female kisses a male. One. All right. This is a little, yeah. So maybe it, yeah. It could, yeah, Natalie's right. It could fall anywhere if you really think about it. You're absolutely right. And that's a little bit harder to do on this screen, but because sometimes sexual behavior, just because you have sexual behavior, it doesn't necessarily, we make assumptions about, sexual orientation, but she's absolutely right. All right. So now if we were together in a room, we'd be broken up and everybody have their own poster to work on, and we'd have more of these that we could to work with. And after a while, you can kind of see that not everything is on the 1 and 5 end. We have some things that fall in the middle, and there's some other examples, but we got to move on. But the point, let me go back to my slide. But the point is that to kind of, if I would have started out at the beginning and said, guys, our sexual behavior is on a spectrum, and there's just, there's a wide range. some people would not necessarily believe me. And so we do that activity to just kind of show that things are just not always boom, it's male, boom, it's female, and there's nothing in between, or it's heterosexual and it's homosexual and there's nothing in between, you know? And the fact of the matter is that we're very complicated creatures, humans, and our sexuality is wide ranging about how we feel and who we're attracted to and things like that. So just kind of keep that in mind, and just because and there might be things that are out there we're not even aware of yet. And so just being open-minded and accepting of people, I think is just really important. All right, so I've got about a half hour left, and I want to go into some policy. The reason I put this Google thing up here is there are a lot of terms that you will hear, and I don't know what to tell you other than Google them. Don't look at the images. Just Google, just to get the word. If somebody uses a term that you're not sure of, you can say, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that term. Can you tell me what that means? But, don't be afraid of, it's okay to ask, and it's okay to Google. It really is. All right. So we're back to this picture. So when I initially asked this person on the right, what is their biological sex? What do you think now that we kind of went through these buckets, do we know the biological sex of this person? No, we don't. We have no idea what the biological sex of that person is. That's right. All right. What about the sexual orientation? Do we know what the sexual orientation of this person is? Nope. Nope. Do we know what the sexual behavior of this person is? Now we do know this, well, of this particular moment. Yeah. So all we know is that there are two people kissing. Yeah. Now, could we make up a story about that and say, well, they're in love and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we could, but it could be that they're both actors that are, posing for, I don't know, some ad to go to Greece or something, I don't know. But it could be that they are not attracted to each other at all, and they're just pretending. It's not out of the realm of possibility that people sometimes kiss people and they're not particularly attracted to them, or they don't like them. People do different sexual behaviors for different reasons, and applying their sexual orientation or their gender identity or biological sex on top of putting that on them without knowing anything about them other than their kissing it can be a reach. And so it's just, it's just nice to be careful about assumptions and not put things on people that are not there, that they haven't shared with us. All right. So let's talk a little bit about laws and policy. So this is true or false. Now, the person that's helping me, I forgot her name. I want to say Francis. Is that what it is?
Faith.
Faith. I knew the F. All right. I need your help on this. So do people have the option to do sort of like a thumbs up or thumbs down or a true or false or something in their reactions?
Let me see here. Yep. Thumbs up, surprised, heart, yes or no, a check mark or a X for yes or no.
Okay. All right. Well, let's do check. Let's do, whatever people want to do, but let's just, check mark or for true, X for false would be good. And just give me a sense of what people are saying as I ask these questions. Is that okay, Faith? All right. So true or false. And this is about school policy at first. All right, so there is a school policy called Policy 4373, and it's called Expected Behavior in Safe and Supportive Schools. So true or false, do you think? It does not include language that includes sexual orientation, gender identity, in types of bullying and harassment, that behaviors that staff must report. True or false? What are they saying, Faith?
Really kind of a little bit of both, a lot of trues, a lot of falses, kind of 50-50 split.
Okay. All right. So it turns out that that is false. That actually does include language, which I'm very, very happy about. And staff have to report, and they have to include in their report if it's related to gender identity or gender expression and sexual orientation. All right, next, true or false. Another different policy, policy 5902, true or false. It requires all public school employees to respond immediately and consistently to bullying and harassment including sexual orientation and gender identity, in manners that effectively addresses incidents, deters future incidents, and affirms respect for individuals. True or false?
Lots of trues.
Lots of truth. They are smart people. That is true. This is a great policy, employee code of conduct, and it does say that they have to address things. It does include sexual orientation, gender identity. We know that from the earlier one, and they have to do that in a manner that addresses it and deters future incidents and affirms respect for individuals. Love that one. All right. All right, here's one. In West Virginia, transgender male athletes are prohibited from participating in public education, middle, high, and college level male sports.
Trues. Couple
All
of
right.
false, mostly trues though.
Yeah. All right. So this was a hot button piece of legislation recently, but actually this is false. It was a trick question though, because you are what it says is that the sports for females, women, or girls shall not be open to students of the male sex. Now, in that actual legislation, it has definitions. Their definitions maybe not be the same as ours, but their definition of biological sex or male sex is based on at birth. So anyway, so if you're a trans guy, you can, a transgender guy or transgender male, you can still participate in sports, but if you're transgender female, you cannot. All right. Again, that was a trick question. All right, moving on. True or false? It's legal for two men or two women, people of the same sex, to get married in West Virginia. True or false?
Trues.
Lots of truths. Excellent. Yes, that is true. So same-sex marriage has been legal in all 50 states since 2015, and actually in West Virginia, it's been legal since 2014. And a lot of people don't know this. I mean, I did this training maybe 2 years ago with a group of school administrators, principals, vice principals, and they thought they did not know that this was true. So a lot of people do not know this. All right, true or false? It is legal to fire someone or deny them employment based on their sexual orientation or gender identity in West Virginia. Is that true or false? Depends on where you were. I see some people posting.
Couple of both, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is really interesting. So this is false, but I want you to look down here at how recently it was true. I mean, I had to change the slide because it's so, I mean, most of the times that I have ever done this training, the answer to this is true. But in June 15th of 2020, so just, a little bit less than a year ago, Supreme Court made a decision, Bostock versus Clayton County, and made it illegal to discriminate against somebody based on their sexual orientation, gender identity in the workplace. Now, previous to that, there were some exceptions. Some people may be aware of like non-discrimination ordinances and things like that. So there are some towns and cities that have ordinances, and there were some exceptions. But as far as like a full legal thing, just as recently as last year, is it now it's illegal to discriminate in the workplace. All right, true or false? Is it legal to evict someone or deny them housing based on their sexual orientation or gender identity in West Virginia? True or false? Oh, I think I read that wrong. Should be, is it legal, true or false? All right, so that is, it's true. There is no, now there certainly are exceptions, but there is no law either in West Virginia or federally that prevents that. And again, there are some exceptions, such as maybe some companies have that, or one of those non-discrimination ordinances that we talked about. There are some exceptions, but there's no law that prevents it. All right, I'm going to skip over a few things just for time purposes. All right, question, true or false? It is legal to deny someone medical care based on sexual orientation or gender identity in West Virginia. True or false? So this is a really interesting one, because this is false now, but it's went back and forth. Lots of back and forth on this. In 2010, when the Affordable Care Act was put in place, they had a provision. It's a section called 1557, and it says that you cannot discriminate based on race, color, national origin, sex, age, disability, in certain health programs and activities. So it says sex, but then how do people define sex? In 2016, the administration at that time said that sex encompasses those based on gender identity, which it defined as male, female, neither, or a combination of male and female. So it was very clear you cannot discriminate based on that, especially gender identity, in 2016. In 2020, the Department of Health and Human Resources, they issued a different statement that said that the new statement that that only applies to discrimination based on biological sex. And then in as recent as just a few days ago, that was reversed back to the understanding of the 2016 rule. So really a lot of back and forth on that. And so until it is defined in federal legislation, that will probably continue to go back and forth depending on what the whoever's president, basically, or in Congress. All right, so I talked a little bit about, exceptions. These are some examples of the NDAs in West Virginia. If you live in one of these cities, there are some kind of non-discrimination language or law or resolution that says that, you're not going to be discriminated against in housing or in the workplace, although now the workplace piece is covered by Supreme Court. And here's just like some of those where those cities are located. All right, now we've got about 20 minutes, but really less than that if we're going to take questions. And so I have a tendency to pack way too much stuff in my trainings. So I'm going to give you guys a choice right now, and I'm going to let Faith make the decision based on your all's response. Do you guys want to go over some kind of like landmark Supreme Court cases about, what you can do or not do, or do you want to go into, or you want to talk about some strategies that we can do to create a safe spaces for LGBTQ. So if you can put in, you want the law or you want strategies.
Strategies.
All right. Okay. All right. Give me just a minute to get through some slides. All right. So different techniques or strategies that you could use. One is just doing trainings like this. I mean, some of just a lot of, I think discrimination comes from, I mean, obviously there's like some really negative type of discrimination, but some of it is people just honestly do not understand some of these biological things and some understand policy and things like that. So anytime that you have an opportunity to open up your workplace or your community organization to just do basic training to get people sort of on the same page is really good. This training that I'm doing right now, I do sort of like a much longer training with teachers, throughout the day, and we have a little panel where we spend like an hour to have people with different sexual orientation, gender identity come in. We all have lunch together and we talk, and then people have a chance to ask questions. And there are some people who have just never talked to a transgender person before, and being able to like ask questions, and it's just it does not matter. I mean, I could turn backflips, and always the favorite thing about the training is the panel, because they really get to have a connection. And I just think it is the just incredible thing to just open up. And so training is, and gaining understanding is very, very helpful. If you have an organization and you have forms, a strategy that you could do is to review that form for areas where you require people to fit into the binary. Now there might be some reason that you have to have information about their gender on there. And if so, I mean, sometimes you have to, right? But sometimes you don't have to. And so if you don't have to have that on there, or if it doesn't have to be a check the box, if it could be gender blank, and let people fill in what they want, that's much more respectful to people. And then of course, on the screen is the option of being able to just include a box of binary. But I really think just like a blank space, and let people kind of fill in, write in what they identify, how they identify their gender. Forms are very stressful to people that identify outside of their gender identity, especially transgender. It can be very, very stressful. So a really, really, really simple thing that people can do is to just put up like a safe space poster or something like that. If we were in a training together, I would have these already printed, and they would be laminated, and I'd hand them out, and you'd ooh and ah about how awesome my lamination is. But I can't do that. So what you have to do is to Google, LGBTQ safe space, and go to images and save the image and print out your own and put it up on your door or on your desk or something like that. And I just cannot even begin to tell you how important this is for your clients or your students to come in, whether, it's a student themselves, just knowing that's there. They know that this person is a safe space. This is a safe space. This is a safe person. Parents of, parents who may identify as, a gay couple coming in for a PTA or coming in for whatever, seeing that you just cannot imagine how comforting it is for them to walk in and know that they are not going to have these immediate barriers of trying to get past the fact, that they're gay with you, or they're transgender with you. They don't have that stress. They can like deal with whatever they need to deal with, because they see that and they can identify this as a safe space. Other things that you can do is my daughter does this. She has a safety pin that she wears in her ears, and that's not just for the LGBTQIA community, but it's also for other marginalized groups, Muslims, and just different groups. Just having a safety pin is sort of like a little nod to, I'm a safe person. This is a safe space. I'm not saying you have to do this in any way. I'm just saying here are some things that you can do. Other things that you can wear a pin. I can't find my pin. The last time I was went through airport security, I had a really cool pin, and I had to take it off to go through security, and I can't find it now, but it was really cool. Somebody gave to me, and whenever I wear it, I mean, just strangers come up to me and go, hey, I really like that. I really like your pin. Thank you for wearing that. T-shirts, flags. This is the LGBTQ flag. This is transgender flag. Just having, you could put this about the size of a 3x5 card and, put it, somewhere near your desk. And that's a signal that this is a safe space. Some other things that I want you to know about: resources, and this are much more related to the teaching profession, but Teaching Tolerance is an incredible website with incredible resources for any age, and it's not just about LGBTQIA, but also, understanding about race and different things like that. So it's a wonderful website, and they have, I think it's a quarterly magazine you can sign up for. They all these free resources. You get this really nice magazine every few months. It's really great. And Welcoming Schools is primarily for elementary schools, but it's just a really great resources there as well. One of the things, and I'm really close to running out of time, but one of the things I want you to take away from this is the importance of windows and mirrors. All right. It's very important in our development of who we are, to have a window to the world, right? To see things that are not us, to see things that are different from us, to see me as a white woman. It's really important for me to see Black women that are in charge of things. It's important for me to see Muslim men who are actors on TV. It's important for me to see Latinos in the entertainment community. It's important for me to see Asians in positions of in the government, a window to see things that are not me. That's important for me. Equally important, it's important to have mirrors. It's important for me to see myself. It's important for me to see myself in leadership capacities, as coaches, as entertainment, this idea of everybody, depending on, regardless of who you are, we need to see ourselves, but we equally need to see people who are different. All right. And so when putting together, the books that kids are going to read, what are those stories about, and who are the people in those books, the movies, that the television, the entertainment, we need to see ourselves, and we need to see others, and trying to, as parents and as administrators in school, we need to make sure that every kid has windows and mirrors. Here is an example of both a window and mirror, depending on who you are. This is Alan Turing. If you ever watched the movie Imitation Game, he was a freaking genius. Because his development of like a computer and breaking codes was basically able to end the war, World War II, by more than 2 years, saved over 14 million lives. He was a gay man. It was a gay man that was put in jail because he was gay. and ended up I mean, there's kind of a really horrible story, but he ended up committing suicide at a very young age because he wasn't able to be in that, even though he was like this incredible hero, an incredible human being, he wasn't accepted for who he was, and ended up committing suicide. But people need to know about him. As far as windows and mirrors, Pete Buttigieg, he was the first openly gay cabinet secretary ever confirmed by the Senate. That happened this year. First time this year. First transgender person. This is Rachel. I don't know if you say Levin or Levine. I'll have to look that up. But anyway, she's Assistant Secretary of Health. She was just confirmed this year. So these are nice windows and mirrors for people. I want to just briefly mention pronouns. It's just nice to ask people, what's your name and what pronouns do you use? Whatever they say, just do it. You don't have to think a whole lot about it. If I say my name's Selena and identify as female, I use she and her, just use it. There doesn't have to be a whole lot of discussion about that. And there was a really good session yesterday, and I knew this, but it was really nice to hear it again. But they said don't use the word preferred pronouns. It's just pronouns, not preferred, just pronouns. And then if you have an opportunity, try to phrase things in a way that you don't have to use he, his or her, like in this example, every student is required to hand in his or her report, and so that's like a little dig at somebody who doesn't really identify strongly as male or female. And so there's different ways to word things. Every student's report needs to be handed in. Students are required to hand in their reports. I mean, there's ways that we can, and we have to practice it sometimes. There are ways that we can word things that are that don't put things on people that make them uncomfortable, when what we really want them is to study or work or whatever it is in that particular setting. I want to give you one example of a gender neutral activity that I just absolutely love. And so thinking of ways to get out of this binary, different strategies. And I teach a graduate class called Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. And one of the assignments is to do what would normally be a binary activity to figure out how to do a gender neutral activity. And this is what a middle school phys ed teacher turned in. She said, I think it was a she, I teach middle school, and every year we do basketball. We always lower the curtain and make two courts for the basketball. One side's for girls and one side's for boys. The first week was extremely boring because I was watching the girls' side and they were not into the game at all. They literally hated having to play it. I decided after the first week to mix it up and make it all co-ed. When we came in the next week, I picked all new teams and had boys and girls on each team. After about 10 minutes, I saw a huge difference in the girls. I went from watching them barely play to getting into the game. They were excited and they were actually trying. My co-teacher agreed that we should never separate them again because it made such a huge difference. Once we made the change, I was embarrassed that we had been doing that. I'm not sure why our thinking was like that, but I know that I will never let it go back to the old way. So just trying sometimes can be extremely liberating. Now, this person did not send in a picture, but I pulled this off the internet. That doesn't look like a middle school person, but still, I mean, I just think it's it was a great story. And as somebody who teaches a graduate level class, it did my heart really, really good to see that. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Hopefully everything's good. We've got a few minutes. I know some of you all need to jump off to do something else. I'm glad to stay on, but I'm going to take some questions for the next few minutes. And Faith, I'm going to put you in charge of asking questions if that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. I've been keeping track of them. So
thank you.
The first question is, what is the difference between pansexual and bisexual?
Oh, that's a really good question. And I'm certainly not an expert on this, but I think like bi means two, and so bisexual, I think, sort of initially came into play when people realized that they identified with that they were attracted, if regardless of what their gender is, they were attracted to both males and females, right? But the term pansexual is often described more as hearts, not parts. So regardless of what your parts are, more typically male, more typically female, or if you're transgender or intersex. So pansexual is more the whole encompassing of whatever body or packaging you come in. I'm not limited by the packaging. I'm more connected to people on a soul level, and whatever packaging they got is where I'm happy with. Does that make sense? So it's much more encompassing.
The next is, can you give a brief description of a non-binary gender?
Yeah. So some people feel very male, and I think this is hard for people who feel one way to understand how other people feel. So I'm female, I'm cisgender, I feel female, and we can sort of imagine what males feel like, but some people just don't have those strong feelings. Like they don't have the strong, I feel like a man, or I feel like a woman, and they sort of have these feelings of not feeling very strongly one way or the other, or sometimes they feel more inclined one way or the other. And so sometimes it's termed as gender fluid, where it's just not quite as static as I think, that we normally think. So it's just more encompassing of allowing people, not allowing people, but acknowledging that people just don't feel solidly one way or the other all of the time.
Right. Now, the next question goes back to when you were describing Gwyneth. Sorry, I can't remember how to pronounce that condition.
Guaidosis. Yes.
And why is it found almost only in the Dominican Republic and New Guinea?
Well, that's a good question. I think probably what happened is there was, I don't know, probably centuries ago, there was some type of mutation that created it. I think it's a recessive gene, but like it comes through because it's a small island. There's, it's been, through the evolution of that the communities there. It just, and those are both very poor communities. It is not a stretch to think that the mutation couldn't happen in the United States or other parts of the world, or that people who live there could move to different parts of the world, and then through their reproduction system it gets passed. But I'm sure it just started out as a mutation there and just has not really left the island yet.
So the next question refers to having to have surgery for a patient who might have ambiguous genitalia. They said, is this still a standard to do without the parent's consent?
So Selena, hold on just a second, if you would. I'm afraid we've run out of time for the regular presentation. People can stay on and talk with Selena and get their questions answered. But it's 3:00 and the main session is going to be starting in 5 minutes on the main channel, and that's going to be the wrap up of the conference and honoring Sam Hickman. Before I go, I want to say thank you very much to Selena, and I know from the chat that people have been very interested in this excellent information. It's just been very helpful. And I wish I could stay and hear these questions and answers. Best wishes to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody that was on, and I am glad to stay. All right, so the question was about is surgery done on a child without the parent's consent? No. I'm not aware of any time that surgery has been done on a child without the consent. What I am aware of is often the parents have difficulty accepting the child and want something done, want it fixed. They're concerned about what happens when they have a babysitter. They're concerned about what happens when my child goes to school. There's a lot of I'm not saying I agree with that, but I've been in these trainings where people, express, if they were a parent, how much they would want this fixed. And so no, it doesn't, they don't do it that way. But what very often happens, it's just say, hey, the doctor says, hey, I think I can make this out of this. And they'll schedule a series of surgeries that a child will go through to I don't know, to put a more normal genitalia appearance on the child. And again, the intersex community has been very, very strong advocates for stopping that. And it still happens some, but it's much less than it used to be.
If DNA isn't tested at birth and one feels they're internally the opposite sex, should they be tested?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I think it wouldn't hurt. I think there's nothing wrong with it. I have no idea what it costs to get a DNA test, but I think, I don't know that they should do it. I think people should ultimately be who they are. And I think it's up to us as society to accept people where they're at. But it might be something that somebody chooses to do. And I think that would be just fine.
And the last one is, I've heard healthcare workers like nurses and pharmacy workers mention that it's sometimes difficult to give medical care when someone is transgender. For example, a patient needs a precise microgram of a medication. The patient may get too much or not enough because they are biologically another sex than what they identify. Can you briefly give solutions about possible situations like this?
No, because I'm not I don't know that end of the medical side of things, but what I would recommend really is to just, do your best to find a doctor that is in tune with the particular issues of the transgender community and figuring that stuff out. I mean, that sometimes is very, very difficult to do. So I don't know the medical solution to that. But I do want to say this. I wanted to say this earlier and I didn't really have time. So I will say that when we were talking about that slide in terms of medical care, and somebody in the chat caught that, because that slide was just recently changed, I didn't take the false out. That should have been true. So whoever caught that, you're right. I need to go fix that. But think about this, some people, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I'm just saying some people get like really, really weird about, let's say like hormone therapy or gender reassignment therapy with, transgender people. Transgender people need a lot of healthcare that have nothing to do with that. I mean, if you're a transgender a male, meaning you were probably born with female anatomy and you identify as male, and you're living your life as a male. You have not had, I mean, it's very, very expensive to have gender reassignment surgery. A lot of people don't have that surgery just because they can't afford it. But you probably still have breasts. You probably still have ovaries. What if you have ovarian cancer? What if you need to have a mammogram, to preventive stuff, or if you have, like ovarian cancer or breast cancer. I mean, there is an enormous, before, when there was this discrimination was allowed, legally allowed, I mean, a doctor could say to a person that has ovarian cancer, I'm not going to treat you because you're transgender, and get away with that, you know? So this whole medical thing related to sexual orientation, gender identity is, it's cruel. It's cruel that people cannot access the healthcare that they need.
Definitely. Those were all the questions that came up in chat. But a couple of people did ask if there was a way to get you to do trainings and stuff like that, like how they would contact you in order to try to get you to come to trainings and things like that too. So.
All right, I'm putting my contact information in the chat. And I'm putting my email, smvickers@wvesc.org. All right, that's my phone number and email. Oh, and I was gonna post too. Let me see if I was gonna try to post my my slides in as a file because I didn't get them into Sam in time. But anyway, if you'll email me, I'm glad to send you the slides. And I had a couple other, you know, just a few kind of resource things that I think that'll be helpful as well. So anyway, I'm glad to, this is my, of all the trainings I do, this is my absolute favorite to train. I'm glad to do it. I think it's important information to share with people, and I'm so glad that that you allowed me to share this information with you guys today.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a pleasure. I know I speak for everyone when we say that this was really, really informative and really educational. We really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for helping me out throughout this whole thing. Faith, I really appreciate it.
Oh, not a problem. It was my pleasure. Have a wonderful evening, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.